but yeah, no, it's quite lovely. Yeah,
I haven't heard of anybody using smoked salmon in it, but they may.
Oh, okay.
Can we?
Yeah, so that might be like the East Coast riff on the West Coast idea.
So can we expect for the 2022 Tzedakah event a class on making salmon gefilte fish for
There
you?
we go. Happy to do it.
All right.
Although I will say that since it's a once a year recipe, now turning into maybe a once every couple of years recipe, that I'm not sure that it's really so much a matter of a class is doing it. It's more like, well, here everyone can come while I'm making my gefilte fish.
Well, that's
and remembering how to do it. But yeah, so thoughts. Go ahead, Lori. I'm sorry.
I said you're on.
Yeah, great.
I'm signing up.
Good. There we go. Awesome. All right. So the story of Passover, right? I was looking at something this morning that I thought was really kind of interesting, right? Is that the story that there really are kind of two stories woven into the Haggadah, right? And the one story, which is the one that I think we're most familiar with, right, is the story of liberation, right? And we were talking for some of us who were on a call that we had on Wednesday, right? The sort of most important line in the Haggadah is B'chol dor vador chayav Adam lirot et atzmo keilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Right, so that in every generation, right, every person, and it's actually really interesting. I hadn't really thought about this until today, when I was looking at this source. It really is not every Jew, right? It's every person. Adam, right? Adam is the word for person, and so really it is incumbent upon every human being, in a sense, right, to see themselves as though they had been part of the Exodus from Egypt, right? And I think that that's such an important concept, right? That on one hand, the Exodus is a, let's say, quasi-historical event, right? It's something that, whether it happened the way the Bible describes it or not, right? It's something that happened in the past, right? But the rabbis are very, very clear, and I don't think that they are, so far from the biblical understanding of it, right? That this is something that every person experiences in their own lives, right? And that there is that sort of recognition of both the need for liberation and the reality of liberation from various types of oppression, right? And that does not mean, right, that everyone who is oppressed will be liberated from that oppression, right? Or that everyone's oppression is equivalent, right? Because we know that that's obviously not the case. But to sort of recognize in oneself the way in which we are in Mitzrayim, right? We're in the narrow place. We are in various forms of distress, and at the same time, right, that we have escaped from that, right? That we have experienced that exodus, right? Go ahead, Eva. Yeah.
I have heard recently that there's some of the opinion that we haven't left Mitzrayim, that we're still in the process of Mitzrayim until the Messiah comes.
Right.
You'll wait a long time for that.
You might.
Absolutely. Right. We want Mashiach now, right?
Sometimes anticipation is better than the reality. So,
Well, right. I
You know?
was listening to Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan today, and they had
my favorites.
they're amazing. Well, they're mostly amazing. I had to stop listening to them because, after the election, because Jim Browdy's anxiety about the political situation was so over the top that he made me unfit to do anything. So I had
He's
to
a
stop
little
listening.
bit much. I used to go down to the Boston Public Library on Fridays
Yeah.
and watch the show live.
Oh, I mean, they're so
their
great.
chemistry is amazing.
It's incredible.
But I'll tell you that she is not as compelling without him.
Nor is he without her.
Yes,
Is that
They
true?
are like the perfect old married couple.
yeah.
They fight all the time.
And the because we had her as the my closing meeting for the League of Women Voters on the state level. We had our convention, and she was our keynote speaker, and I was very disappointed. She was not as compelling as she is when she's with Jim.
Yeah, I think right. I think she's the kind of person who is, and I don't know if he's this way also, but she clearly is the kind of person who shines in dialogue, as opposed to someone who is, sort of a self-contained
speaking.
talker.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure whether anyone at a Seder with Jim Browdy would ever get a word in edgewise.
Right.
Well, that's true too.
I'd give him a run for his money.
Yeah, I'm sure, Sandy, you would. But anyway, my point in bringing them up, right, is that, and now, of course, I can't quite remember what the connection was, but they had Ann Patchett on, who is a novelist, and she says that her technique for writing a book is that she spends anywhere between 6 months and 3 years sort of coming up with the story, and then she spends a certain amount of time writing it down. And she says, the problem is, right, that until I start writing it, it's the the best book that has ever been conceived in the English language.
I remember that one. Yes.
Yeah. And as soon as I write it down, I've ruined it, right?
Yes.
And so I do think, right, that there's a so yes, I think that you're absolutely right, Lori, that contemplating, right, Mashiach and the time and Ha'olam Haba, right, the world to come, right, it's a lot more appealing now than if we actually had. We probably
there's some details that I would like to have worked out, like this thing about how all the souls are going to roll to Jerusalem.
I mean, those
traffic jams are going to be terrible.
Right. I mean, absolutely.
And what about this concept of reincarnation? How do we have 4 bits of a soul?
And do I really want the temple rebuilt so that we can resume sacrifices?
Exactly. So again, all those things. But so putting that aside, right? I think that Cheva is getting to something very important, right? Which I think is again part of this injunction to see ourselves as though we have come out of Mitzrayim, right? Because I think what's really important is to remember, right, that sure, the Israelites made it out of Mitzrayim. They made it out. They were liberated from slavery from Egypt, and then what did they do? Right? They went and they wandered in the desert for 40 years, right?
So because nobody bothered to ask directions.
Right, exactly. Well, because they were all the men were in charge. So this is what happens. But again, regardless, right? The archetypal story, right, is that liberation from slavery, and we know that in very, very painful ways from our own national history. Right, that liberation from slavery does not actually mean the promised land, right? that the promised land is forever sort of receding from view, right? And people, when people get upset, as they very often do, about poor Moses never makes it to the promised land. Well, nobody makes it to the promised land, right? Even
If he
Joshua
can't make it, I mean,
right?
he's named in every single passage forever. And if he
Right.
doesn't make it,
Well, but I think the point is that the point is right, is that the promised land is forever out of reach, right?
exactly.
We can only get as far as we can get, right? And the reality is the goalposts keep moving. So we think we see it over the next horizon, right? We get over the next horizon, and oops, the pot of gold. It turns out that the rainbow has moved along with us, right? And we don't find the pot of gold. So, but the other aspect of the Haggadah and of the Seder, which we maybe don't always necessarily spend enough time thinking about, right, is this theme of gratitude, right? That and he actually, this author made an argument, right, that the word Haggadah, which means I had always been taught that it has to do with the telling, right? Haggadah is very close to Haggadah, right? But he claims it's from Haggadati, right? I have declared.
Huh.
I have declared, sort of with gratitude, my freedom, right? So that there's a declaration of gratitude, and that's why we say Hallel during the Seder. Hallel is a series of 6 psalms that we say on festival days in the synagogue. The only time that we're enjoying to sing it at home, right, is around the Seder table, right? And so that gratitude becomes a major theme, and we know this, right, from the Dayenu, right? Dayenu, right? It would have been enough, right? Oh my gosh, how many blessings do we have? Right? It would have been enough if God had just taken us out of Egypt. Like, oh my gosh, that is just amazing. But God did all these other things, right? And every time we say Dayenu, it would have been enough. But there was more. Go ahead, Mine.
My favorite is all these things that God did, and God created the dew. Is that only on Pesach, or is that more regularly on Shabbat too?
Well, I mean, Dayenu is a Pesach thing.
I know, but there's
Right.
that line, God created the dew. Like,
Well, God created the dew is actually a really interesting thing. Now, are you talking about in the Seder, or are you talking about
is it in the Seder and in Shabbat? And the dew is much more important than we ever thought it was.
Absolutely.
It's pretty amazing.
Right. Absolutely. And so, right, there's a whole special prayer that is said, I believe, on the first day of Pesach, right? So we'll hear it, and so it's definitely worth coming on Sunday. If nothing else,
I'm going to interrupt for a second. As a retired farmer here, dew is very important.
Yes.
Because on days that if there's not enough, like for instance, last summer we had a drought. And I don't know if you noticed that here in the Boston area, but there was
it was noticeable,
serious drought. And so dew is one of the few things that could actually water.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have irrigation,
right?
Dew actually is one of the few things that would water in an arid environment.
Right.
It's that natural small water cycle that we've disrupted so badly.
Right.
Right.
And it's actually really important to note, right, that Pesach, among other things, right, is an agricultural holiday.
Yes.
Right, and it does mark, right, the transition from the wet season, right, the rainy season, to the dry season in in Eretz Yisrael, right, in the land of Israel. And so that's why we insert into the Musaf prayer, right, the additional prayer on the first day of Pesach, we insert this whole prayer for dew, saying, please God, send the dew, right? Because if God doesn't send the dew, right, then we're done for, right? We won't have crops because we know there won't be rain, right? Around here, right, we have summer rain and winter rain, right? It's, but in Eretz Yisrael, right, there's not so much rain once the dry season starts.
In Maine, in the summer, the NOAA weather forecast always includes the dew report for the blueberry barrens.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Jim, I have another question,
Yeah, go
a
for it.
little bit off to the side, having to do with Hallel. And this comes from a discussion I was having with a Catholic friend who was doing, quote, Bible study. And in their studies, they were talking about the Last Supper. And she asked me, what is the prayer that is said at the end of the Seder meal? And of course, the only thing I could think of was parts of Hallel. But the Seder, the Seder as we know it, is from a later time.
Later time than what?
Than when Jesus was alive, having the Last Supper. Right?
Well, that's actually a really interesting question. And it's not.
So I've been trying to find an answer for her, and I can't.
Well, so I mean, there's two answers, right?
Every Jewish question has two answers.
At least, probably more than that, right? So the Seder, the institution of the Seder is dated sometime around the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. So there's some people that say it was after, and there are some people that say it was before, right? One of the complicating factors, right, is this idea of the Last Supper, right? Which I don't know off the top of my head. I wasn't anticipating this question in particular, so I didn't do that much research into it. Along the lines of, is there evidence that something along the lines of the Last Supper actually happened?
Right.
Or is it something that was added later on? So I don't know the answer to that question.
So the reference, they were studying the Gospel of Mark, and that's where this came from her point of view.
Right.
So
right.
It just got me thinking.
Right. Well, there's a couple of different prayers that are at the end of the Seder, right? Besides Hallel, right? There is the whole, but I do think that most of them are post-Christian.
Nora.
If Nora unmutes herself too much, then my dogs will unmute themselves.
Sorry.
But don't worry about it, Lori. Don't. If she keeps on barking, then you can mute yourself.
She won't.
Other than that. But what I was going to say is that that both the Christian and the Jewish traditions, right? We have to remember that they were significantly under the influence of Roman culture.
Yeah.
Right. And so the institution of the Seder, and probably also if there was a Last Supper in real life, or if the Last Supper became something that was important, right? It's to include, right? It's quite possible that both traditions sort of independently were drawing on the Roman/Greek institution of a what's the word, of a symposium, right? Where you get together. This is where we get this idea about how we're supposed to lean, which many people don't do anymore, right?
Yeah, that's I like that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ellen.
Isn't the Last Supper Passover?
Well, that is the assumption, right, of right, that is the assumption, but that assumption is based on a few things that may or may not be true. Right, the first thing that would require, right, is that that Jews were already celebrating a Seder meal, right, in the way that that we sort of are accustomed to already by the Mishnah, right? That custom had started already at the time of Jesus, which is not something that we can be sure of, right? Or at least that I can't be sure of, right? The other thing, right, that it's assuming, right, is that the evangelist, when he wrote about the Last Supper, right, was that he was actually trying to emphasize the Jewishness of Jesus, as opposed to having some other kind of motivation for having Jesus participate in this symposium-like thing, right? It's important to know, right, that there is there's no sacrificial lamb, right? Jesus takes the place, right, of the sacrificial lamb. So in that sense, it does appear maybe that it's less about a Seder, right, and more about the Christian idea of Jesus being the Paschal sacrifice, right? So again, but if we get too deep into these historical questions, then I'm going to very quickly come to the end of my knowledge, and it'll just be sort of speculation, which is fine. I love speculation.
Thank you for indulging my digression.
No, but it's fine. I mean, I do think, right, that it's not unreasonable, right, to say to your friend, right, that the prayers at the end of a Seder, right, is Hallel, right? It's because Hallel begins before dinner, right? And this is very important, right? We never split up Hallel, right? It's always the 6 Psalms right in a row, except on the Seder night,
right,
where we sing the first 2 Psalms before dinner, then we have dinner, then we say Birkat Hamazon, right? We say the grace after meals, and then only then do we finish Hallel, right? So the entire meal happens in this sort of context of gratitude and praise. Mine, it looks like you want to say something. No, okay, great, all right, good. So the story of Passover, right, which we know, right, is dominated in the Bible, right, by God, by Moses, right? The story of the Seder, right, as in the printed Haggadah, right, is dominated by whom?
Moses.
Not by Moses, right? By God, right? Who was the one that liberated the Israelites from slavery in Mitzrayim? It was not Moses.
It was God.
It was God, right? It was God through and through, right? And so, which is interesting. This does not mean, as is sometimes stated, right, that you're not supposed to talk about Moses at the Seder, right? You're actually supposed to tell the story, right? But that part isn't printed in the Haggadah, right? So anyone that, if you ever had the idea, right, that the proper way to do a Seder was to read everything in the Haggadah and nothing that's not in the Haggadah, that's not right.
No.
And there's plenty of things that you can, omit from the Seder and still feel like you're doing it right. I'm not going to make any claim for tomorrow night's Seder that I'm leading as being a quote unquote halachic Seder, but not least of all because we're doing it on Zoom, so there's no dinner. We're going to have people eat either before or after. But there have been the idea of the Seder, right, was always to add, not to just stick to the text that's printed. All right, so
I actually
think,
have a Haggadah that says how to do the Seder in 30 minutes.
right, there's the 30-minute Haggadah, right?
Right.
I actually saw once a 15-minute Haggadah.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could do the 30-second Haggadah, right? You know the 15-second one, right? The 15-second one was they enslaved us, God liberated us. Let's eat.
Right.
Right. So that's that's good. All right. So I'm open to questions. Oh, I think the other thing, right, to say about Pesach, right, is about food, right? And what is the meaning of the Pesach restrictions, right? Right. Very interesting topic, right? Very in a very triggering topic for many people. What do you mean I can't have bread, right? Or if you're gluten intolerant, what do you mean I have to eat matzah, right? So it tends to elicit a lot of feelings. Let's say. Go ahead, Ellen. You had a question.
It's no bread, but is there also no yeast or leaven?
Right. No yeast or leaven is really a big part of the point, right? So no yeast or leaven, right?
The
Yeah.
other
Go ahead.
thing
Go
too
ahead,
is
Ellen.
it depends on the what tradition you come from. So Ashkenazi, they don't believe in rice or
Right.
legume or beans, where
Right.
the Sephardi does. So, you know.
Right, and in the United States, by and large, most I'm not going to say most Jews, but I would say that most Jewish organizations, liberal Jewish organizations, even if the majority of their constituents are Ashkenazi, have now adopted a Sephardic attitude towards Pesach. Primarily, I think, on the basis of there's a bunch of different reasons, but I think one of the primary ones has to do with the rise of people who are vegetarian. So many people who are vegetarian, and one of the things about Pesach is it's people make a big deal, right, about how you're not supposed to eat meat and blah blah blah. You're not supposed to eat bread. But I actually think it's less about bread, right? Because obviously you can eat matzah, and if you've never had them, Hebrew Senior Life in Rosendale has the most amazing Passover rolls that you kind of wish you could eat all year, but you can only get them at Passover. So you can certainly eat bread-like things, right? So I actually think the meaning is somewhat different, right? I think the issue is more, and this is actually kind of interesting in recent years, right? When we've had this sort of proliferation of kosher for Passover foods, right? That you were never able to get before.
Right.
Like somehow people now have kosher for Passover. I don't know. I'm going to say rice noodles. I don't know if that's actually the case, right? But the Passover the kosher for Passover, all kinds of stuff that you never used to be able to get. And I actually do think that part of the point of the Pesach restrictions, on a very sort of concrete level, right, is to simplify your foodways, right? And the issue, of course, with the modern food industry is that it makes everything more complicated, right?
Well, liberating from the narrow space, so we have to feel the narrow space.
Right. Well, it's not just. I actually think that it's not just about feeling the narrow space. It's about feeling that narrow space and feeling that you are able to liberate yourself from it.
Yeah.
Right. So that there is a way in which. For me, as someone who doesn't eat very much meat on a regular basis, right? Pesach really is, or in previous years it's been, we'll see how it goes this year, right? Pesach has been this sort of week of sort of freedom to eat all the meat that I feel like eating, right? And it's, it's very much about kind of plain food, right? And
So you're
it's-
doing a Purim basis of Pesach, eat all of,
Yeah, exactly. Eat meat until you don't know the difference between blessed be Mordecai and cursed be Haman, right? Get drunk on meat. But
Well, I wanted to say something that I
Yeah,
read an
please.
article recently that said that back in the day when they left Egypt, they did use yeast in the bread. The reason it was flat is they didn't have time to let it rise. And all of our focus on the yeast is modern and
Well,
all. So
right. I mean, I think, right, in general, no one had yeast, right, in the way that we often think of yeast, right? The stuff that we buy in the stores,
right.
right? No one had yeast.
No, they didn't have that, but it was
everybody had
regular.
yeast.
It was regular bread. It just didn't
Have time to rise.
have
Right,
time
and that's
to rise.
and that actually, Helen, it's a really good point, right? That is the point behind what they call shmora matzah, right? The idea is that you're supposed to the dough for the matzah is supposed to be mixed with water and then put in the oven within 18 minutes, right? 18 minutes high, right? In
Yes.
in Hebrew letters, right, means that the yeast
Right.
will have, the wild yeast will have had time to sort of become active, and so fermentation begins traditionally 18 minutes after you wet something. So that's right. So that's exactly right. Modern leavening is neither here nor there, right? But you're not supposed to use it, right? And people make a big deal, right, of the modern leavening, especially in the liberal communities, right? That the leavening is about being puffed up, right? It's about, there's a sort of very this idea that you should look for all the chametz, right? All the puffed up places in your life, all the places where you are not behaving in the way that you really want to. So they are very often make it into sort of a quasi Yom Kippur, right? You're supposed to, look for all the things that you don't do well, right? I mean, I'm not opposed to that. That seems fine, but I think that the more important thing, right, is this sort of emphasis on haste, right? That even though of course you want a slow cooked brisket, but that the idea, right, is that the Israelites, had their Pesach meal, right, with their loins girded, their sandals on their feet, all this stuff, right, that everything had to happen fast. Right? And so there's this sort of emphasis on let's get to what really matters, right, rather than on all of the fancy stuff. So that's a little bit of an idea about the food. There's obviously much more to be said about all the various restrictions, and you can go. I just actually looked online yesterday because a person had asked me about, do you need to change the aerator on your kitchen faucet? And there's actually not surprisingly differences of opinion, right? Some people say, well, yeah, over the course of the year, it gets sort of caked in all the mates from the various stuff that goes into your sink, and the stuff kind of rises and gets stuck in there, and you've got so every year you should change it. Other people say, no, you don't need to change it. You just need to clean it out and boil it and put it back on. Other people say you actually have to cover it up with a sock and tie a sock onto it so that the sock will trap the chametz. And so you sort of get the sense, right, that there's, and I think what often happens, right, in terms of Pesach rituals and Jewish rituals in general, right, it's, again and again, people tell me with great assurance, right, that the reason there's kashrut is because of hygiene, right? Even though all of the surrounding cultures right, ate all kinds of pork and didn't seem to suffer from it in any particular way, right? The entire huge nation of, sort of huge country of China, right, wouldn't be able to, exist without pork, right? But it must have been some sort of trichinosis problem that meant that was why the Jews and later the Muslims wouldn't eat pork, right? But now, these things, they have symbolic meaning, right? I don't know if anyone really thinks that the chametz is going to be trapped in a sock. It's like the last thing I would want to have on my faucet. Like, I mean, certainly not a used sock, but I mean, even a new sock. Like, what do I want a sock? But anyway, neither here nor there.
So this whole thing with the aerator, you have given me a whole new level where I can fall short, because I never even knew about this.
Thank you, Lori. And that is also part of it, right? Is that it's that, and I get, and this actually, I do think sort of links up to what Eva was saying and what Lori was saying about, Mashiach coming and how great it's going to be, right? Is that there is some way in which every Jew, right, needs practices, right, that they can only imagine or only aspire to, right? And it could be, as from the way Lori looks at it, right, that it's just to make me feel inadequate in a whole new kind of a way, right? Or it's a possibility, right, that that we are always able, right, to find new ways of becoming more connected, right? More connected to God, if we have a sort of theistic way of looking at the world, more connected to our tradition, more connected to our community, right? That there's always where to grow, right? And sometimes the best path to growth, right, is in some sort of self-limitation, right?
So also the contrast. I mean, how do you recognize good if you don't see bad?
Well, there's that too, right?
How do you recognize, how are you, I mean, would we have been as grateful for Biden if we hadn't gone through Trump?
I mean,
for those of us who have that feeling.
For those of us who are grateful for the new president, right? I mean, maybe not quite, but I think I would have been quite thankful not to have Trump in the first place. But that's another story, right? I would love to have had a world where I didn't have to know where I could have imagined that, right? As opposed to having to live through it. And I don't necessarily mean from only from a. I don't mean this as a sort of a lifelong Democrat. I mean it as someone who's really concerned about his country, right? And so, but yes, there is also just the reality, right? That there is limitation, there is Mitzrayim in the world, right? And there is sometimes a value to imposing a kind of a Mitzrayim on us, on ourselves, right? And I think we do it all the time, right? People who find themselves maybe wishing they were a little more svelte than they are, right? At any time in your life, right? Maybe you impose upon yourself a self-limitation as you don't have that dessert, right? And you do that, right, for some sort of notion that by withholding something from yourself, you will find some measure of improvement, right? We are human, of course, right? So we tend to find that when we feel that other people are imposing these things on us, right, we bristle and we don't want any part of it, right? But we're generally happy to do it for ourselves, right? So, so I think the tradition is here, right, in a sense, to offer us all kinds of options, right? So if we've done everything else, then we can worry about the aerator also, right?
Jim, I'm not gonna sleep tonight.
Laurie, I'm so sorry. I've triggered your OCD. It's terrible.
You have,
I
like,
apologize.
in a big way.
I apologize.
Because once I had to replace my aerator and it took several implements for me to get it off. And then I had to go to Home Depot with the old one and say, I want one like that.
Right.
No, I don't have time before tomorrow night to do this.
No, absolutely not. And as I said, right, there is a strong tradition, right, that says that this is an unnecessary thing. I don't mean like because the conservative movement said you don't need to do it. Star K in Baltimore says it's unnecessary. So there are good from Jews, right? Serious, much more firm than me, right? Who claim that this is an unnecessary addition to the Passover preparation. Is only necessary for people who feel like it's somehow that they like their mother did it, so they should do it, right? And that's the thing. That's the thing to remember about Jewish traditions, right? Is that what our parents did, right? Or what is meaningful to us, and sometimes those two things are the same, and other times they're exactly the opposite, right? I don't do this because this is what my mother used to do, and it used to drive me crazy, and so I do the other thing, right? That's why there is such a range of practice, right? Even among Jews who would consider themselves part of the same community.
So there are a series of tales about old chemists who could crystallize anything out of solution just by waving their beards over it because they had so much stuff. So do people that are that devout, do the men make sure that they scrub their beards to get all the like breadcrumbs out of it?
Are you asking this because you need to convince Stephen to?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Or yourself with your beard?
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
actually, it's actually funny. I've been telling myself for the last 2 or 3 weeks, not because of Pesach, but that Jim, it's time to trim the beard. But it's COVID, and so it's like, and then of course, I don't know why in the spring, but last spring and now again, the CDC has released this sort of chart of beards, which are the beards that are okay under masks and which are the ones that are not okay under masks. And so, so I now have a COVID reason for making sure my beard is trimmed, but out of laziness, I just haven't done it. But now, Lori, you're reminding me I need to.
No, you just, Jim,
I'm
you just
pretty
need
sure.
to shower.
Right.
A little shampoo.
I have to shower soon because it's almost the end of April and I haven't had my monthly shower because I haven't needed
March.
it, so I'm sorry. It's almost the end of March and I haven't had my monthly shower because I just haven't needed it yet. So it's, just a matter of time. All right. So any final questions about Pesach? Any further stories about family lore? It doesn't have to be about aerators.
Oh, I have such anxiety now.
Relax and enjoy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Some of the implements we have to use
Oh
are
my
a lot
gosh.
of fun.
That's awesome.
Today
And
is my birthday and you've just ruined it by making me think about the sink aerators.
because I found it.
Oh, I
What about
found
the
it.
bathroom
That's
sink?
The
I
Oh, look
bucket
at that.
Put the afikoman in.
love it. It's an
I got it
afikoman
in,
holder.
in
That's
Toronto
great
when I
because-
was at a sisterhood convention.
That's amazing because it means that, because my problem always was that, I would hide the afikoman, and then by the time the kids not only had found it but fought over it, right, it had been reduced to crumbs, which is not that big of a deal. There's always plenty of matzah, but that the crumbs were all over wherever.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is
another
another,
sort of poignant thing. Remember when they had that series on TV way back when about the Holocaust? And at one point, the Nazis had this piano. When the woman opened it up, she was singing. And inside, she found an afikoman in its cover.
Wow.
So that the Nazis had arrived during the Seder.
Oy.
So this is
Unbelievable.
another place where a dog comes in handy.
Right.
Dogs are wonderful. My son said after their dog passed away, he needed a dog to clean up after the crumbs.
Have to import one. All right. So
Thank you all.
thank you, everybody. I think what I'm going to do is if people have specific questions about the Hebrew, I'm happy to respond to them. And then I know that Kent had some questions about the Haftarah trope, so I'm happy to answer those. But I don't think that I'll go through a chapter or something like this of the book, because I've got enough all kinds of stuff to prepare.
You gotta go change your aerator.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Well,
have,
I gotta go take care of somebody. Yeah. Yes.
I'm gonna have to leave, but thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
It's okay with me if we meet, sometime next week.
That's fine. Let's see if anybody has questions about the Hebrew, and then yeah, you do. Ann, you're saying goodbye. Okay, Ellen, you have questions?
Yes. On
Have
page,
some math,
All
everyone.
right. So
To her
30.
questions, can we just
hold on one second,
wrap
Ellen.
this
Hold
up?
on.
on page 30,
Hold on one second,
Ellen.
Ellen.
Before you get into your questions, Ellen, those of us who want to say goodbye would like
Yeah.
to say goodbye.
Right.
So no questions at this point. I think I'm doing fine, and
Great.
Sherry can handle them. And I guess that's probably all I have to say for now. So
Phenomenal.
thank you so much. It's coming along well.
Good.
I did want to say, you said we're not going to go through another chapter of the book, and that's a good thing, because I'm just barely getting into chapter 4, and this business about 4 different adjective forms is just like,
It's killing you.
yeah, this is such a brain exercise,
Yes.
but I'm working my way through it.
You're working your way through. Good.
Thank you.
And the only thing I'll say, Mayim, is just to remember, right, that not to get too hung up, because it's, when you're talking about prayer book Hebrew, it's all about the passive knowledge. You don't have to produce these, right?
Yeah.
You just have to recognize them.
Right.
And so it's, I'm not going to come at you, right, with how do you say good times, in Hebrew. It's more about, if you saw tovim, right, is that plural or singular? Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah.
I'll keep at it. Have
Good.
a wonderful holiday. See you
Thank
at
you,
the
Ma'am.
Seder
See you-
tomorrow
see you.
night. Thank you.
Sameach.
Good.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Okay. Cheva, do you have questions?
No, not, I'm still plowing through chapter 3, so.
Great. Perfect. All right. Sounds good. Go ahead, Ellen.
on chapter 5, page 30, how do you pronounce blessed and how do you pronounce many?
All right. I don't have the book in front of me, so
Blessed, how do you pronounce blessed?
blessed is Baruch. But I don't. Can you hold chapter page 30 up to the camera so I can see it? Hold it up closer. Okay. and raise it up so I can. Yeah, that's Baruch.
Baruch?
Yeah, Baruch. Yep.
Baruch.
And-
And how do you pronounce many?
Again, hold up the word right in front of the camera so I can see it. You got to raise the book some more. There you go. Rav.
What?
Rav.
Rav?
Rav. Rav also means rabbi. And,
Oh, it does?
yeah, and it means so. And where you'll see that in the prayer book, Rav, right, is not generally. I mean, yes, you will see the word rabbis from time to time in the prayer book, but more to the point, you'll see Shalom Rav, right? Great peace is the prayer at the end of the Amidah in the evening. Shalom Rav
And Baruch means blessed?
means blessed, right? Or sometimes people translate it as praised.
Is what? Praise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Fred, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. I'm just listening.
Great.
Everybody should have a good Passover Seder.
Thank you.
We
You
used
too,
to
Fred.
have it, but now we used to have them. But I'll tell you the truth. Of all the people, I am the only one left. I am the oldest of my kids and my relatives.
Oh my gosh.
All the rest of my sister, my brother-in-laws and my sister-in-laws, they're all passed on.
Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
used to
Fred.
have a Seder we used to have one Seder we had in our house and the other one on my sister-in-law's house.
Wow. That must have been so nice to have two Seders in two different places. That's great.
Oh no, it was so nice, but unfortunately,
Yep.
I'm the only Zadie left.
The only Zadie left. Well, at least you're still around, Fred.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good, Fred. I will. So, Fred, I'm planning to make a trip down to Randolph so we can hang out in person sometime after Pesach.
Okay.
Right?
Yep, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Talk to you soon.
So Jim, can you hear me?
Thank you.
I
Thank
did
you.
that.
Take
I'm sorry.
care.
Thanks, Fred. Good. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I just didn't deal with the camera today, but
That's okay.
so I literally went through my portion of Samuel 18 through 22 and did all the
Amazing.
coloring, and
Yep.
so I had just a lot of questions because it seems like I'm recognizing in verses 18 and 19 and 20 that it's et nakta and then ending in sof pasuk.
Yep.
But then it looks like the very last one is a katone clause, and then maybe there's a revi clause or.
Okay, so give me a second to look it up.
But if all this is too much for you today, those are just the kinds of questions I'm wanting to deal with. Like if we have 15 minutes, that's not your important rush day.
No, that. I'm happy just to go through. I just need to make. I just
because
need
now
to look.
for sure, like I know what merkah, tipa, et
Right.
nakta, and sof pasuk sound like, but in incorporating the other clauses and then how they work within each other, I'm reading it, but
Right.
I think I need to like bounce it off of someone to fully understand.
Yeah.
What.
So this is chapter 25, right?
1 Samuel 12, 18 through 22.
Okay, 18 through 22. Okay, give me 1 second. 18.
So
Yeah,
as far as I could tell, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I had my magnifying glass out with the print on my
Good.
page.
Right. So the first one is a katone.
The first one is katone. 18?
Verse 18. Yeah, katone. Vayikra Shmuel el Adonai.
Okay, now what is the symbol, the little arrow thing there that would tell me this is going to be a katone clause?
The way you can tell what clause it is by the last word of the clause.
Okay, so when it ends at Shmuel at the end right there, Viet Shmuel.
Okay, at the end of that verse, the end of every verse is going to be a sof pasuk.
Right, of course, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
that's the word, the Shmuel, Viet Shmuel is the one that tells me it's a katone clause.
Wait a second. So no. So the clause, right? Each clause is just a series of words, right?
So it's not the verse, it's the clause.
The whole, right? Every verse, right, has generally, most verses have several clauses. There are some that are just one clause, but for the most part, they have at least two, and often more than that. So
I can see the et nakta clause.
Good. So the thing
um,
always to do is to locate the sof pasuk and figure out how many words are in that sof pasuk. So in this case, right, it's et Adonai ve'et Shmuel, right? That is the sof pasuk clause. And then working backwards, right, you will see that the word me'od, right, has what clause on what trope under? Do you recognize that one?
Which word?
Me'od.
Oh yeah, okay. And at the end, okay, so that's a merkah.
Nope, it looks like a merkah, but it is not.
Oh, it's the one with the little dot. It's the merkah with the dot.
Exactly.
Okay. So
it's a
see,
severe.
this is the thing though, like we could go on for an hour analyzing this, and
Right.
I don't want to tie up all of your time
No,
today.
so what I would do is why don't you mark it up?
I have marked it up, but I think I might have done it wrong because,
Right.
you know.
Okay, so that's fine. So why don't you take a picture with your phone of your
Right.
markup and send it to me, and I'll review it, and I'll let you know where I would put a different where I would have a different ending to the various clauses.
Yeah, and the thing is that even though I Xerox copied it, I mean, it's fairly small in terms of annotating and writing in
Yep.
my little notes. So I kind of wish I had like an elementary school version, a preschool version with like a giant page
Right.
with fat letters so that within
Right.
each clause, I have room to make those colors and annotations and
Well,
footnotes.
one thing you can do, depending on how, one thing you can do is to go to. I'll send you a web page, and what you can do is blow it up. I don't actually know if this will work, but you can actually put it. I'll try to figure out what text we can use that has the trope marks, and stick them into a Google Doc, and then you can highlight them that way, and you can enlarge.
Yeah,
letters as much
like
as you
if
want.
if there's some sort of program where I can literally type out the Hebrew letters, even if I could just type the Hebrew letters and then make my own dots and lines and
Right.
all that, I'm
Well,
fine with that.
Well,
But that way I could
definitely-
like correspond. I can write the Hebrew letters, I can write the transliteration, and then I can also write my notes all there. So it kind of, because right now, if I send you a picture, you're going to see where are you going to make marks because it's marked
Right.
up.
Exactly.
It's kind of crazy.
Well, I wouldn't make marks on it. I would just tell you.
Right. But
let me see how this does. Oh, okay. It works pretty well.
okay.
All right. I'm gonna share a document with you.
In my email.
Yeah, I'll send it to your email.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because then I'll continue on with this. But then if we can have some sort of counseling time or just
absolutely.
Really, I'll put my camera on and we can compare notes. I am making a lot of progress, but again, I don't want to learn it wrong because if I've marked it up wrong and I'm developing bad habits, I'd rather be corrected sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, but I'll share this document with you. Wait a second. Hold on. Yeah, I'm gonna hold on 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
I'm running into the old problem that I have a hard time multitasking. All right, so this is oh yeah, come on, give me a break here. Oh yeah, okay, so this is Samuel. This is 1 Samuel.
1 Samuel 12, 18 through 22.
25, 18 through 22. Okay, I have through 25, but it doesn't matter. It's really only to 22, huh? Okay, so let me get rid of the rest of this and I can make it even bigger. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm going to
Because printing
share
from
this.
my Torah, it's like between the dots for the vowels and then the dots for
Right.
the tropes, sometimes they're so blurred together that I'm not sure. I'm trying to weed out which is a trope and which is a vowel, but having a larger print would certainly, even with my reading glasses and magnifying glass, I'm like a little confused.
All right, so I've just shared it with you, and you'll
Excellent.
see it's a huge font.
Excellent.
And although I see that in this font, the the tropes did not make it. So we need to switch to a different font so that the tropes are there.
And I have been listening to the YouTube with your doing the chanting, and
Great.
it does help for sure.
Good,
So,
good.
certainly it's all coming together, but I feel
Right.
all of a sudden this rush, like, oh my God, the time's going to fly by.
Yes,
And-
right, exactly. So, all right, so you now have this in,
Okay.
you have this in 32 font Arial.
Okay.
Arial, I guess Arial. And,
Okay.
and it has the trope marks. So,
Excellent.
so that's good. All right, good. So this is actually a great tool. It never even occurred to me that, we can put the, so just choose a particular color for each trope and
Yeah.
we'll take it that way. All right.
Okay. Yeah. And again, then when I come back, we can review what I've done, but also maybe
100%.
have that conversation about how the different groups all go together, how the clauses work within each other.
Right.
That's
Exactly. Right.
still a little bit overwhelming.
Well, that is something I have to say is something that I began to assimilate through the practice of doing it over and over again. What I began to find, right, is that each trope sort of has a different way of linking up to other tropes. So obviously there are some tropes that are part of clauses, so they are sort of an extended musical phrase, right?
Mhm.
And then there are other ones, right, where you begin to say, oh, okay, this is the kind of one that usually leads into the next one. So a good example is actually in line 18, right? The word me'od has a tavir under it. It just so happens.
Right. I just
in
noticed that from what our
Right.
conversation was. Yep.
Right. It just so happens that I've noticed over the years, right, that very often, right before the sof pasuk will be a tavir, right? So this is a haftarah, right? So vayir chol ha'am me'od et Adonai v'et Shmuel. So somehow,
Yeah.
so you'll begin to sort of get into your head, right, the way that the tropes work together. But it does take some doing, right? It does take some, and as you go through the purple book, right, you'll have more opportunities to encounter different portions. Right, and what I would recommend, right, depending on how much progress you're making, right, is to begin looking at, begin trying to sight read other passages in addition to the one that you're doing, so that you have that opportunity to sort of get a sense of how the system works more broadly. But let's see where you're at. You know what I mean?
So all verses end with a sof pasuk.
Exactly. Every single verse in the Tanakh has a sof pasuk because every verse ends, right? There are verses that don't have an etnachta, right? Not
Right.
every verse has an etnachta,
I noticed that.
right? But every verse has a sof pasuk.
Right. And then are some verses or clauses, I mean, can you have like etnachta and tavir and katon? Like, do they
They are endlessly combinable.
combined? Yeah.
Right. So the only thing you can say with assurance is every clause will have a sof pasuk, and they will all have one sof pasuk. Right. You can say that not every clause, not every verse will have an etnachta, but by far the majority will, and every verse, if they have an etnachta, will have one etnachta, right?
Okay.
Other than that, all the various clauses can repeat and twist and tangle, and there's no other hard and fast rules about the number of the other types. But there are definitely patterns, right? Patterns will emerge where, for instance, you often have maybe 2 katone clauses in a row, but only very, very rarely will you have 3. Okay. So yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
Does katon mean small?
Katone does mean small. Yeah.
And gadol means large.
Exactly.
So they're opposites. Katon means small and gadol means large.
Exactly. All right. Any other
All right.
questions for today?
Oh, that'll get me going for a few more days.
Good. This will keep you busy. Okay. So,
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
you're welcome. Now, Heva, you wanted to, you're welcome, Ken. You're thinking about doing some Torah also, Heva, is that right?
That is correct.
Great. So now are you gonna, how do you plan to do the preparation for that? Are you hoping that Sherry will help you
I'll
out?
be able to do with Trope. I think it, one step at a time.
Right. So the question is, do you want to work with Sherry? Did you want to work with Sherry on the trope, or was Rachel planning to work with you? I didn't
I
understand
believe
that.
Rachel was going to be working with me.
Phenomenal. Great. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
and in fact, we're going to start working on the next 2 paragraphs after the Shema as a way to start.
As a learning. Good.
Yeah,
Phenomenal.
that's
Phenomenal. That's
our next step.
Great. And I will get you, I put Rachel in touch with Sherry, because Sherry knows which parts of the Torah that Lori and Mayim are also going to be laning from the Torah. So Sherry knows what aliyot those are, so that we'll find an aliyah for you as well.
Okay, from what I understand, if we do it in June, it's Korach.
It's Korach, yeah.
Okay. Not the easiest one.
I don't know. I find in general that the portions that have stories are easier than the ones that are about laws, and that the hardest ones are the ones about the hardest ones are the ones about the tabernacle that we just finished.
Right. I would agree with you. I think so, because anything to do with laws is kind of dry.
Right. Well, and some of the laws are actually very interesting, and so you kind of get into how they're formulated in Hebrew. But the issue with the tabernacle is that the same words repeat over and over and over again, and you can actually completely lose track of where you are in the scroll. Because it feels like you saw exactly the same. Exactly the same sentence like 2 minutes ago. Wait, I know that it's repeated, but am I actually doing the one that I'm supposed to be doing, or did I skip back a couple of lines and I'm repeating? So anyway, it's a whole issue. All right, thank you.
Thank you, and have a wonderful.
Have a great good Shabbos and a good Pesach.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Oh, one question.
Yeah.
Did you get my form
for
the Pesach meal?
I don't know. We will find out now, won't we?
Well, because I put it in the internal mail. I wasn't sure if that's where
I wouldn't have gotten it. It would have gone to Gail and then to the dining room. So I will check. I will check now, and I'm going to hope for the best.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.